Yeah, so Brooke Hipp served as the CMO at ACM, a regional accounting firm, until its combination with BDO in August of 2020. Brooke has been recognized as CMO of the Year by the Denver Business Journal and a top 100 C-suite executive. She now works with BDO's Brand and Communications National Team. In her free time, she's already told us about her painting, and she also likes making kombucha.
Nice.
That's awesome.
Well, I wanted to just jump in and kind of briefly introduce the rest of the panel, but Brooke, I think it was a great idea, for people to kind of share a little bit more personally about themselves. But we have Representative Lori Ehrlich. I apologize, Lori, if I butchered the last name. She's chair of the Export Development Committee for the Massachusetts State Legislature. She's been a CPA for 3 decades, holds her BS in accounting from Lehigh University, and an advanced degree from Harvard's Kennedy School of Government. Lori earned the nickname Mother Grizzly after founding 2 award-winning grassroots public health nonprofits that cleaned up drinking water and air for over 80,000 people. We're also joined by Hanifa Ismail, who recently joined Wish back in 2019 as the head of tax. Wish is an online e-commerce marketplace. She's responsible for overseeing overall taxation matters for the company. Prior to that, she served as head of tax at Arista Networks and began her career with the Big Four firm Ernst & Young, spending roughly over 13 years. We're also joined by Amelia Ransom, who is the Senior Director of Engagement and Diversity at Avalara. She's responsible for driving strategy and initiatives that impact, solidify, and improve company culture. Amelia has over 29 years of experience building and executing strategy within human resources and business operations in a world-class and customer-centric organization. And last and not least, Rebecca Campbell, who just wrapped up her first presentation. She's with the Colorado Society of CPAs. And as I mentioned earlier, I was very impressed to find out that she's been with the organization for over 30 years. So welcome, ladies. We really appreciate you taking the time, and feel free to take it from here, Brooke.
All right, so I'm going to jump in here and just kind of tell you what our goals of today are and how this is going to go. I'm going to encourage the panelists, if they would like to drop their LinkedIn profile link in the chat so people can connect with them later if they would like to. So if anybody wants to do that, that's great. And it'll give just everyone a way to keep in touch with the panelists. So when we were talking about this panel, we really wanted to make it actionable for the people who are attending. And our goal is really to talk about how successful women have overcome common career, what could have been career breakers. And our goal is to share techniques that women leaders, or actually anyone, can use to navigate past stereotypes and barriers to the top. So we've got some pre-planned questions that we're going to go through. We're going to try to keep this moving. Please feel free to drop questions into the chat and we'll address those throughout. Because there are 4 people and we have a lot of questions, I think I have 6 or 7 questions. We're going to try to keep it moving. But like I said, ask questions throughout. You've got a panel of amazing women and I'm excited to hear what they have to say. I know a couple of them personally. We did not over prepare this because we want it to be natural. So my first question, and we're just going to go through this and I have everyone answer. We'll start with Lori and I'll just call on people. So how it goes on my screen, and that way we don't overtalk each other. But just briefly tell us, what your role is, what your level is, what your experience, and then tell us something personal about you, and then we'll get into your story. So Lori, if you want to start, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. I guess For something personal, it's all kind of tied into my story. I was just a mild-mannered mom and wife, and raising, I have 2 daughters, and they were very little at the time. I won't go into the whole story, but you know, I guess my journey to finding my voice and going from being sort of meek and quiet into Mother Grizzly from Marblehead, which was one of my nicknames, I think really just, you know, transformed me from, you know, sort of a meek person into like an unstoppable, you know, champion for clean air and clean water. I have a very unusual background. As you know, I told you I'm going to be the only CPA again in the legislature. You know, but to be able to join a CPA conference and talk about, you know, my environmental stuff and my policy stuff is really a thrill. So Brooke, I hope I didn't pressure you too much into hosting here or moderating, but I could tell you were so talented just in our initial meeting. I'm so glad that you stepped up to do this. I really appreciate it. And keeping us under control may not be easy. So thank you for being up for that challenge. But I'll be happy to share more about my journey later on, but
That's great.
Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you. Amelia, how about you? Tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're at and how you got there.
Of course. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here with you today. I'm Amelia Ransom. As Brooke shared, I'm Senior Director of Engagement and Diversity at Avalara. I've been there about 2.5 years. And prior to that, I was with Nordstrom. So I was with a retailer for about 26 years in various leadership roles, I've been a store manager and been in the business and been in HR. And so I think one of my superpowers is speaking both business and people to each other and connecting them to each other. I love to travel. COVID has really put, of course, a damper on that, but I love to travel and I've been to many, many continents. I only have about 2 left to go, Antarctica being one of them. And I can't convince the man in the life to go one of these to go to Antarctica, but soon, I'll get there. It's been a significant amount of time on the African continent each year.
Great. Hanifa?
Okay, so yes, so I'm Hanifa Ismail, head of tax at Wish. As Bill have introduced me, I have worked at EY for over 13 years. And I spent around 10 years in the industry, mainly working for B2B companies. So this is my first journey to work in a B2C and B2B environment, which has been interesting. And something personal about me is that I'm a mother of 3 boys, currently 2 in college and 1 is in high school. It's been extremely challenging, I would say, is, you know, I have the 3 boys while I was in public accounting, so I can, you know, speak to some of the challenges later on. And I would say being a mother of 3 have helped me, you know, tremendously in working with different people as well, because all my 3 boys have different challenges, including autistics, ADHD. So it kind of helped me to deal with disability quite a bit, you know, when dealing with my boys and working with other people as well. So,
thank you.
Rebecca, and also I'm an immigrant. I'm also an immigrant here. There you are.
I feel like we're well represented on this panel.
Yes.
Rebecca, how about you?
My name is Rebecca. I'm the COO and the CLO for the Colorado Society of CPAs. I've been there for 30 years, and I think I liked what Amelia said about superpower. So my superpower was perseverance, which I had a couple of occasions where moving up into a management role was difficult. And so perseverance and refusing to let that be my story is my superpower. Something about me, I love to travel. I'm really jealous of all the places Amelia has been, but I also have enjoyed during COVID-19 being at home. I love reading and I love eating nachos while I'm reading. So I've really enjoyed kicking back with some snacks and reading some books.
Great. All right, so we're going to go into some questions. You don't all have to feel like you have to answer each one. I'd encourage you to answer the questions that you're most passionate about. And again, panelists, as audience members, as you want to chime in, feel free to. Tell a brief story about a time a stereotype or assumption impacted you, and how did you overcome it? Who wants to jump in?
I can start. Oh, I see Lori's talking.
Unmuted. There you go. I can jump in on that one if you want.
Sure.
Because I've had, you know, really two chapters in my life that I've really, you know, countered stereotypes. Most recently, I guess, for the last 12 years. I've been a state rep for 12 years now. And when I first launched a campaign to run for the seat, it had been held by somebody for 17 years, a man for 17 years. And politics, believe it or not, has evolved quite a bit in the last 12 years, that we're now starting to see women in politics as an acceptable thing. But when I first launched my campaign, that was not the case with everybody. And I remember just getting questions from somebody, you know, some people, who's going to be home with the children? Are you sure you're up to this? They never said that to the guy. I was the most qualified person. I had an advanced degree. I was a CPA. I had spent the last decade cleaning up my community, air and water. But still, everybody, you know, I got questions that the guys that were running against me didn't. There were 5 of us running, and I won, obviously. So people, you know, awarded me with their confidence, but you know, it's still uphill for women running for office. It's harder to raise money. It's, you know, so you know, your perception is different than it is for men. Men can. I know somebody once said to me, a guy wakes up and as he's looking in the mirror and he's shaving his face, he's thinking, why am I not president of the United States? Meanwhile, a woman, they've studied this, has to be asked 5 times before she even sees herself in that role. So I think that's probably true across professions, but you know, we're raised in a way where it's not part of our upbringing to see ourselves in that role. We don't have the role models because there weren't many women in politics. Plus, our upbringing tends not to, you know, I'm speaking in broad generalizations. That's changing, of course, and you know, my daughters are super empowered, but you do bump into these stereotypes, and you do bump into people putting up obstacles because they think that you can't do it. And I think it's stunning when you're sure you can do it. It's stunning to hear that, but you also have to be able to counter that and just say, you know, don't worry, I've got this. You have to be able to do it in a way that assures people that, you know, nothing to worry about. It's going to be fine. Don't worry about it. So, so that was my biggest hurdle.
Great, thank you.
I can probably go next. So I've had issues around not looking very old and going into a lot of meetings with older CPAs and looking at me wondering, why is she here and does she, you know, who is she? So the way I've overcome those, because it was really difficult, was first I would always come to the meeting prepared, because when you're knowledgeable and you know what you're talking about, and you can talk, you know, about whatever subject matter, you know, as an expert, I think that really helps you. I also worked really hard in my job. I read this quote and I wrote it down. Men are promoted on potential and women are promoted on proven performance. And I think that's kind of what Lori was talking about. So not only was I prepared in every meeting or everything that I went to, but I worked really hard to prove myself, just because it's what I had to do at the time. And then the other thing I would recommend is networking, because when you network, you can find people who will mentor you and they'll help you look for those next opportunities, and they will help you, they'll be your champion. I found a champion for me who is outside of my organization speaking up on my behalf, and that was really powerful in helping me in my career.
I think what Rebecca said is really important in that it is always incumbent upon us to be prepared, to be sure about why we're in the room and all of that. And certainly Lori and Rebecca have shared examples of how they were absolutely prepared for the moment. I think though that part of what that does is say that the challenge of sexism, the challenge of racism is just on our shoulders. And it isn't. The challenge is to eliminate and to eradicate, because when the question, and Brooke, I appreciate the question is framing is, tell me about a time, like we don't have enough time to tell you about the times. The times are all the times, because things like sexism and racism exist everywhere. They are in the air. And so I could easier tell you about a time that it didn't happen than tell you about a time that it did, because they don't follow rules of logic. As a Black woman, racism says to you, you should pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You should do better than that. And then you show up at a top university and it says, how did you get here? Let you in here, right? So it doesn't follow rules and lines of logic, and it will always keep you doubting yourself. It will always keep you doubting your ability and keep you proving why you're in the room. And so the best thing I could tell, if the question didn't specifically ask about advice, but the best thing I could say is when I know I'm prepared, I'm no longer explaining to you why I'm in the room. Go figure it out for yourself. I know why I'm in the room. And if you sit in this room for about 5 minutes, you'll figure it out too.
So I'm just gonna, you said one of the best things that I've, from my own experience, there was a time when somebody asked me, who made me an expert? Who made you an expert in this? And I looked at them and I said, you did. I've been doing this for years. You made me an expert in it.
Exactly.
I mean, but that's
Exactly.
that's to your point. Hanifa, what about you? I mean, you check many of these boxes also. You're like, you know, I'm an immigrant, I'm a mom, I have disabled children. You echo the same thing. Like, when has this not been an issue in my life? But I mean, what are
always happened? I would say it's always happened. Even I would start out with being born and raised in China. I've always been taught to be modest. And I'm also the first generation to have a college degree in my family. So, you know, in Asia, you know, you've been taught to be modest and submissive. And I remember way back when I was, you know, telling my dad I went to college, he's like, why? I'm like, wait a second, right? You know, I do. So me and my sister pursue, you know, college degree outside of and went aboard and study and we prove ourselves that we can do it ourselves. In fact, my sister making money and I got my scholarship. There you are, right? So that's the first step. But then the next step is trying to look for employment when you are a foreign student. So that's another hurdle I have to deal with. Not that, you know, it's because I'm less competent. It's just that I'm not a US citizen. So there's additional hurdle even to get a visa to get the job. So there's another point of influence and, you know, additional hard working I have to, you know, go through. But all in all, I think these are kind of struggles that I value as, you know, great experience for myself, as to just basically never give up. I never did. And being a mother of 3 kind of pushes you to that limit as well, you know, especially with 3 boys. Working in public accounting has always been challenging. So how do I even balance it? So I would say I'm very lucky to have a great family. My mother is around, my parents are around, and I have a great husband too, to kind of help me to get to my career, and also delegation of responsibility. But the one challenging part that I've been, you know, working at EY for 13 years is that possibly with good intentions from the partners in the firm, clients being assigned to me is either a lost company or medium-sized company ever since I have kids. So for me, it's to be able to speak up and talk to the partners that, hey, you know what? I mean, that the fact that I'm working on less challenging clients could impact my promotion opportunity. So, you know, one thing that's important to have a champion, as, you know, Rebecca mentioned, and having that champion and be able to speak up, really have helped me throughout my career at EY. And in fact, I would, don't mind telling you a story that a tax partner, one of the most difficult tax partner would have mentioned, he see me working late. He's like, we should have childcare in premises so that we can employ more women people. So that makes a big difference for me, is that I'm very lucky also to be able to work with many tax partners that promote mothers working in a firm. So it makes a difference to find the right champion for you. So.
Hey, Brooke, can I say something that is important to, I think, what you said earlier? I was reading an article a couple of days about you had an answer, being prepared with an answer, because the question I think was, who said you could do this? And you said I forget what you said, but you had an answer. You came back with what the answer is. And I was reading an article about being prepared, like speaking out when you see a stereotype or something happening, and being prepared what the answer is going to be when it happens to you, I think is really important. And then also perseverance. I think we have to just keep persevering. I had someone tell me I wasn't smart enough to go to college, and it was another woman. And I decided that wasn't going to be my story, and I was going to persevere through that. So
I think, as we've seen, everyone has challenges, and I would say, the challenges are for young people, are across the board, and we all have a responsibility for making this different for future generations. But ultimately, just as we all saw and probably continue to see, you have to take control and you have to take responsibility of your career, and we hope we're going to make it different for others, but ultimately we all had to take some action or own it. So what tools have you each found that you were able to use to excel despite whatever the stereotypes were? So understanding that the world has a responsibility to make this better, and then setting that aside for a second and saying, what did you do for yourself, and what tools, did you use? I mean, and that could be anything. We've heard mentors, so that's probably part of it. But what did you do that you would share, that could be beneficial to others? And Lori, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so my tools might be a little different because they're not necessarily corporate tools, but what I found helped. So I came along and I saw something that others saw, but assumed that somebody was taking care of it. And I think that's the first mistake we make, is we see a problem and we say, oh, somebody's got that, not to worry. But I didn't say that, and I stepped up and I wrote letters, and I formed 2 grassroots groups, really, just to see what I saw and then advocate for change. And through that process, I mentioned this before, I found my voice. And so it was first seeing the problem, knowing that something's wrong. So I think it's instinctual, but then also advocating for the health of the community. And as Amelia and Rebecca both said, you have to be prepared. And I think Hanifa said it too. I had facts at my fingertips. I worked with Harvard School of Public Health to put together a study around, and my whole story centers around a coal burning power plant, which used to be behind me in this picture here. It's not a picture, it's actual. But to understand that this power plant was really killing my neighborhood, my family, and not good for us, I had to have science on my side. So working with experts and making sure that when I spoke to the media, which I did a lot once I got going with this, that they found me a credible source. And in order to be credible, you have to have somebody who can verify what you're saying. So guarding my credibility was really important. And I think that's important no matter what field you're in. I think you have to, if you're going to stand up and like Brooke said, who made you expert? Well, don't wait for somebody to make you expert. You just be that expert. You make sure that when you speak, people can rely on what you're saying and you know what you're talking about. And part of that is confidence. Part of that is saying, okay, I've got the facts. I know how this works, and I'm gonna convey confidence along with my message. And a lot of times that pairing of confidence and actual facts, you can go pretty far. Unfortunately, we've also learned that having a lot of confidence and not having the facts works out well too. But I think, for women, I think it's really important. Our credibility, I think, is even more important than for men. I think, if we are not seen as a credible source of information, it's much easier to dismiss us. Whereas the guy will keep coming, keep saying it over and over again until somebody believes him. And I love men. I don't want this to be about bashing men, but I think in the workplace and in the rooms that I've been in, I think, I think women still have to do more. We still have to be more competent, more credible, more vocal, more, we have so many perceptions that are put on us as well. So it's just a little more challenging. We'll get there. I think we will eventually, and we've made a lot of progress even in just the 12 years I've been in office. But in the realm of politics, we have a long way to go, but we're getting there. We broke one glass ceiling just a week ago. So we're putting the role models in place that are the next generation can grow up looking towards and model their own behavior after somebody who is in that role, and that's really hopeful for me.
Amelia.
I think one of the things we have to do is to tell our stories, right? And so a tool that I use is telling stories and listening to stories, but not telling stories so that you are the center of the story. Mm-hmm. You got to tell a story so transparent somebody can actually learn something from it and build their own career or models in your wake, in your path, right? It's not enough to say, I got here, here's my roadmap to how I got here. That may or may not be the right roadmap for someone else. But if I tell it so transparently that you can understand what pitfalls you may come up against, what roadblocks you may come up against, to prepare yourself and steel yourself for those, then I'm doing my job well. I think we do one of two things many times. We tell a story so heroic that we look so good because it was so hard and we're the hero of our own story. And then we tell stories so downtrodden that no one else would ever want to try it. Mm-hmm. And so telling them transparently and opening and allowing people to see themselves through us, to throw the ladder back down to support other people, has done nothing but brought me more success, right? It's not so much about looking up and who can I find and what leader can I find to mentor me and sponsor me. That's an important part of the conversation, but reaching out and reaching back is just as important, an important part of that leadership trait and skill as anything, because it's one thing to break a ceiling. It's another thing to give somebody else, shoes so they don't step on the glass and cut themselves on the way through.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And that's even in looking at this panel, one of the things that we were looking at is let's not stay down in the mud and let's not stay in the sky, but how can we actually really help people?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I couldn't agree. Yeah, I couldn't agree with what Amelia is saying. You're telling a story, and for me, it's also to be vulnerable, to let people know what my thoughts are. Because by letting people know, hey, you know what, I made this mistake before. Well, let's kind of figure out. Let's not do it again, but be empathetic, and to make sure that the individual get to learn from the mistake. And in fact, this is how my career also started, EY I recall making a $5 million mistake and losing a client. And the only thing the partner told me was, Hanifa, just learn it together, learning experience. That's it. And she walked away. Never give me a hard time. But that was so important. And then another partner would say, client never sent us the information a week before it's due. And the partner decides to fire the client. what does that mean to me? It's basically, you know, I've been, you know, very lucky, but also it's, you know, to be open and to the people that work with me and communicate. And so I would absolutely agree with Amelia about telling story, and you know, for me to be vulnerable and also request feedback as well. I do currently have a coaching session with one of the VPs, because one of my weakest link is public speaking. And that's also the reason why I'm getting on this panel, to get through my fear about public speaking. So there I am. I'm being vulnerable at this moment with all of you guys.
And you're killing it, Hanifa. You're doing great.
You're doing great.
Good job.
Thank you. There we are.
Rebecca?
I love all the things they've said. I think the two things that have helped me the most is I set ambitious goals, and I did talk about it. I talked about what I did, and I don't want an ambitious goal and reaching it to be confused with, I worked really hard all the time, because you don't want someone to see you as the person who's, you know, making the copies and transcribing the notes, and those are busy things, but, you know, creating an ambitious goal and getting there and having people to help me, I think helped me get there, and talking about it, because you need to brag about yourself, and in the right way. I liked what Amelia said about not too high and not too low, but to let people know what you've accomplished. And then the other thing that I think helped me was projecting confidence, even though I didn't have it. I always am telling my daughters, shoulders back, head up. And inside there's always these voices that, you know, should I be here? I'm not good enough. I don't know what I'm talking, you know, all those voices that roll around in your head, but you have to just be confident. You have to self-talk. Your self-talk is hugely important. I'm working, you know, with a couple people on our staff who are always apologizing, or you can't do that. That's something women like to do, say I'm sorry. So, and say it a lot. So just having confidence and listening to how you're talking to yourself and changing that voice so that you project the image that you want.
So I think you've led us into our next question, which is what you wish someone would have told you sooner, or what you would tell your younger self. I think you kind of answered that question for us, Rebecca. So to move through this question, because I think we have a couple other ones that are really good, I'm going to ask the remaining panelists to answer this next question in one sentence. So we're going to challenge you. Lori, you look scared, Lori. I see your face. So what do you wish someone would have told you sooner in your career, or what would you tell your younger self in no more than 2 sentences?
So I'm going to say something very ironic. I haven't started my sentence yet, but I think, no, I'm not going to say it. I think I would want my younger self to say, pursue your passions, and no matter what they are. And if you pursue your passions, you will be great at it, because it's your passion. You're passionate. And I think people feed off of that passion, and they can tell that you're excited about something. Don't do something that you're not excited about. And I could go on, but I won't.
That was almost 2 sentences.
I tried.
Hanifa, how about you?
Hello. Okay, you can hear me now. For me, I think using the ability to influence and persuade people are one of the key elements to be effective in working in an organization or even at home. So being able to convince my son to do homework, and being able to motivate my colleague to support my tax position, for example, will be critical. There you are.
Amelia.
I'm really grateful for the things people didn't tell me. No one told me I couldn't do it. No one ever told me that. And I'm grateful for that. And so I think less about what I would want someone to tell me and what I don't want to tell other people. I want to have people have the opportunity to try and fail and try again or think about it. So I wouldn't tell myself anything except, like I said, I'm really grateful for the things people didn't tell me.
All right, so I think this is a really, really good question. And I think about this in my life and how powerful this has been. Who have been some of your most powerful allies in your quest for career advancement? And we'll let anyone start that wants to.
I think I have been my most powerful ally. Yes, there have been people who have come along. I've had excellent mentors and sponsors and, you know, excellent partner in life and excellent, like I have all of those things, and those things are very important, but none of them replace and supplant what I know about myself and what I know to be true. And I totally believe when people say, you know, if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring your own chair. But I would take that a step further and say, every table is not worthy of being sat at by me, right? Like, yes, I want a seat at your table, but having me at your table does something good for you too. And so we often think about it as this one-sided thing, and it isn't. And so if I'm not valued at the table, I can either go build my own or go to a different table. So I think it's really important to be your own best ally so that your success is not dependent on everyone else's view and definition of it.
That's an interesting perspective. I like it.
This expression you see on my face now is I'm trying to narrow it down, because I've been supported by so many people at different stages of my life that have taken my life in a whole new direction. And, you know, I almost don't know who to narrow it down to, so I'm not going to, but, you know, I've made some incredibly sharp pivots in my life to go from being a practicing CPA to an environmental activist like Erin Brockovich, and then going into politics. You know, to just, I mean, my whole family suffers from whiplash from all of the changes that I've made throughout all of this journey of life. But each time along the way, like when I cleaned up a drinking water supply for 80,000 people, sorry, I'm answering the poll. When I you know, cleaned up the drinking water, I had, I don't know if you ever saw a Civil Action, Jan Schlickman, who was the lawyer that cleaned up the drinking water in a town nearby here. He's played by John Travolta. This was his drinking water. So he was a great ally and a mentor and showed me how to do this. And then I have a politics mom, I call her, you know, sort of somebody elder to me who said, here's how politics works, and guided me through it and stayed with me, and she's still with me. I have a grassroots mom, I love to call her. So there's just, you know, I think the key is to just look out for those mentors and be able to spot them in your life so that you can, you know, get what they're willing to give you, and then pay it forward and mentor somebody else. Because I've found that, you know, I have an intern program in my office, and one of my interns is working for the Biden administration doing messaging. She traveled around with the president. I have another intern who is, you know, doing international stuff, you know, and they're just, you know, and I stay with them and try to guide them in the way that somebody helped me along, you know, to just show them the way. So I think, you know, women especially are really good at this, and where, you know, although in politics, I have to say, you know, I wasn't really all that well mentored by my female colleagues. But generally, you know, I think if you want to be mentored, look for the person who's willing to do that, and then try to be that person for somebody else, because it really can make all the difference.
You know, I'm going to echo what Lori said. I had someone outside of our company who saw me for what I could be. and was a huge advocate on my part. So whether it's outside or inside your company, it's finding that person who sees what you can be and will give you good sound advice to move forward. So that was what was really successful for me. And on a side note too, funnily enough, I have 2 daughters and they're my champions. You know, they'll hear me talking about something and they'll be like, oh no. And they'll be telling me how they think it should be because they just have this view of, which is really cool, anything's possible. And, you know, you can do anything, that thing that Amelia talked about, you know, you can do anything. And they've been huge champions about, you know, moving forward and moving up and being my best self.
Hanifa.
For me, I think it's a little question as well. And I do echo what Laurie and Rebecca says, that there's so many people who were champions and that have helped me through my career. You know, for example, even at home, if I don't have the right support, I won't be able to continue the career, the advancement that I will need. So my family is like pivotal to my career advancement. But at the same time, the people at work would also shape my career advancement and make sure that you can work with the partners, especially in accounting firms. So you work with the partners that promote, you know, mothers, you know, working. And have empathy, you know, throughout my career. So I would say I do have a good story on that. I do have a tax partner that one night just told me, go home and I'll take you home, because I didn't have a car at that time. I will drive you home. It's too late for your kids. I was, wow, that's really very important for me to hear. And he's a male partner as well. And the piece that comes through him is, at the end of the day, he has a couple of older kids, but at the time I didn't realize how important to have a balanced life. I just worked too much. At one point he's like, no, this is not how it should. You need to focus on your family life in order to be successful with your work as well. I was like, oh wow. So yeah, he's a really great mentor. You know, till now he still does it with me. So I would say work with people that can influence and help you throughout, and once again pay it forward, and how to mentor all the different people that work for you, so that you explain the experience that you have and what life is about. And also because once you're successful in life, career will also come around. So
I would like to just add to this, to not limit yourself to people who look like they obviously support you. Because sometimes people who you think may be critical of you may be trying to sharpen you. So find out if they're actually being critical of you, or if they believe in you and are trying to sharpen you. Because once I made the distinction, some of those people who I thought were potentially a little harsh have become great mentors, great challengers, and great advocates of me. I was willing to put in the work. They were able to put in the work for me, and then they became a really, really good advocate of me.
That's a critical point. Mm-hmm. That's a critical point, because we know there's data that tell us that women and people of color do not get actionable feedback at the rate that white men do in organizations, because often they feel like they can't give us the feedback. Now that's part on them, but we have to be seeking that feedback, because sometimes that criticism is born from a place of, I see something in you that maybe you don't even see in yourself. Critical.
Yeah, and it's hard to go from either being crushed, or to get over that feeling of being crushed and say, wow, thank you for that feedback. It's an emotional bridge that you have to walk over, that you should, because it'll help you improve yourself.
Well, and just understand the difference from somebody who wants to crush you and somebody who's trying to give you feedback. And also understand that, and especially in public accounting, people generally are conflict avoidant. and have not necessarily been taught how to give feedback. So if they're trying, it doesn't always come out super well. And the words thank you are really powerful words to get continued feedback. So instead of reacting, thank you are really good words to help you grow.
And I would say, yeah, I agree with Brooke too. Sometimes requests for the right feedback as well will be important, and not be afraid to ask feedback. Yeah, currently I do have like a coaching session on a weekly basis with a VP that kind of me soliciting feedback from him, and I would ask him to listen to my presentations, and after that we'll discuss what are the things that I can improve upon. So that is the piece that I'm, trying to be vulnerable. Even if he's not involved, he'll come back and say, hey, you know what, Hanifa, maybe you can stand up, breathe before you have that discussion. So she's giving me tips, and that I can improve upon myself. So yes.
So what responsibility do you think we all have to help others advance in their careers and continue to break down the stereotypes? Where do we stand, and what's our responsibility?
I think when we see a situation happen that we know is not right, to speak out about it. We've all talked about having mentors, even just the little things like the person I talked about earlier, always apologizing. I'm working with her all the time on not doing that and having confidence and, raising her up to do that. I think setting the example of how we want our work environment to be and how we want it to be. I think those are really important things. And supporting other women for promotion. If we're in the position, supporting that and helping them move up and helping them in their careers. I think that's really important.
Are you asking each of us? Sorry, I didn't want to take up too much space.
Go ahead, Amelia.
Okay. I feel a deep personal responsibility to that, because so many people helped me. And so when I look back over my career, there's no way I made it by myself. And so I feel a responsibility, but I think about that in the context of what kind of world do I want to live in? And what responsibility do I have to that world, to my organization, to a company, to a city, whatever that is, that drives the responsibility. I think people have an accountability to help one another. And, to Rebecca's point, like you should want to champion other women. Nobody wants to be that person that's like, oh, you must like being the only woman here. You don't think there's room for more than one of us. We've all met that woman. We don't like her. I don't want to be that person. I definitely want to be the person that is starting to create the kind of world I want to live in, which is a more inclusive one.
I think there's a natural tendency for successful people to compete with each other. And I think, once you spot that in yourself and in others, it's easier to just say, hey, be my ally instead, and we can go places, or don't, sometimes I meet people and they're just competing with me, and I'm like, don't compete with me. Let's talk about how we can move forward together. So, and I think when people realize that it's in their best interest to get to that place together, they put their swords down, or they say, hey, yeah, there's power in collaboration. I'm ultimately a grassroots girl, and you can't do grassroots. It's not a top-down model. It's very much a collaborative, everybody contribute your expertise, and together we'll build this crazy machine and it will work. So I don't really fit into the corporate top-down thing all that well. But I think it makes me more of a collaborative person and collaborative in my work. I'm in politics and it's super competitive all the time, but I think you can really, I think everybody's better off if we can work together. And that's mentoring somebody, who's just getting into it, or it could even be some across the aisle. It could be somebody who's, higher up in an organization. But I think ultimately, when you realize it's in your self-interest, you can, you know, kind of put your sword down and work together a little better.
Yeah, as for me, you know, I will echo, you know, all of the panelists, what they have been saying, right? That you know, for me, that I've been, you know, come that far, it's dependent on a lot of other people. So being able to pay it forward and it's a natural tendency, especially when I'm a mother of 3. What do I want my kids to be like? Absolutely, with integrity and honesty. And be educated in many ways as well. So the education that I'm giving to kids it's the kind of world I want to live in, and same with the environment at work. It's what kind of environment I like to be in, and promote that. And so I would think the responsibility comes from, you know, the people that have helped you there, and also the time when you have the power to influence, use that influence and make it like make it better. So
Hanifa, there's a question for you. It's not so much a question, but it's more of a request. I don't think that you dropped your LinkedIn into the chat. So there is a request that you will drop that into the chat.
okay, I need to. So I just put in the LinkedIn profile in there.
If you just copy your LinkedIn link,
Okay.
and then you can just drop that link into the chat.
Okay, I will do that. Thank you.
If anybody out there has any other questions they'd like to ask, either drop them into the chat or message me directly. So ladies, as we kind of head towards the end of this, and we'll wait to see if any questions come in. Is there anything else that you would like to share, or that you think is really important that this group, you know, that this group that's listening, the 40 participants that are online listening, know, or from your experience, that, you know, your one takeaway or your one thing that you would say, here's what I didn't share today that I think is really important? Lori, I won't limit you to 2 sentences.
Then I can answer it. So I would, just for purely selfish reasons, I would encourage everybody to run for office, please, because we need more CPAs in legislatures, because it's quite a burden to be the only CPA in the legislatures. We're doing, you know, a multi-billion-dollar budget. So, you know, think about running for office and enriching your life, to look at more than just numbers, and look at people and understand their situation better, and then try to improve on it, on their lives. I think, you know, I think it's very easy in a numbers game to get caught up in the bottom line and forget that there are real people behind it. And, you know, it's just been the most enriching thing about my life, aside from my kids and family, but just, you know, it enriched their lives too. So I would just, you know, if wherever you are, if you see something, you know, if you see something, say something, they always say. And I saw a problem in my community and I stepped up, and it turned into running for office. But there are other paths to make your community better. And just do that. Volunteer somehow. You think I don't have time, but it gives you so much more back than you put into it every time. So I guess that's my message. Just make your community better and talk to people and get to know them. It's super fun and it enriches your life more than you can imagine.
Rebecca.
Yeah, I was thinking about, for me, knowing what I'm good at. I'm good at operations. I'm good at getting things done. That's my other superpower. And so knowing what your superpower is and helping yourself shine in that, because, you know, we all have our weaknesses and our strengths, but your strengths just help you to be better and to shine. So I would say knowing what your superpower is and doing that, because that's what makes you happy. That is what I'm good at. And that's what brings me joy. And then the piece of advice I would leave people with is that you're an intelligent, beautifully made person. And I would say believe it and live it and own it.
I'm muted. Amelia.
You know, one of the things that we sort of talked around a little bit today was this notion of how women show up in the workplace in relationship to being raising children and raising families. And so many times I like to remind people that men are also parents. And so there's an important conversation about how we treat that holistically as a society, and that burden and that weight should not be disproportionately put on women. So I think that's an important thing for people within companies to take away. How is my company showing up around that? You know, how do I want to show up around that? What's the same, what's different? So that's an important part of it. I think there are, as we think about, you know, women in leadership, I think it's important that we think about those intersections. There are queer women, there are women of color, there are immigrant women, there are professional women, there are lots of intersections of women, and not all women see the world the same. Not all women are having the same experiences. And so it's important when we talk about women as a blanket that we look under to see what else is there, to see what's missing, because so often when we say women, frankly, we're defaulting to a woman's experience. And that is one experience, and it is an important one, but it isn't the only one. So it's important that we take a look at that holistically. So I don't know that I leave with a piece of advice, but it's more to think about how we're showing up around the topic personally and professionally.
Yeah, my advice that I tell my boys is find something you're passionate about and do it. Once you're passionate, I think what Laurie have mentioned at the beginning of the seminar, once you are passionate, then everything will fall into place. And also the other piece that a tax partner told me day one when I walk into his office is to have integrity on what you do. Once you follow these guidelines, I think, you go very far. That's my advice.
I love what you all have said. Amelia, something you said just really resonated with me. I remember, I don't know, it was probably 2 years ago, I was trying to get some information from someone, and it wasn't working. And the partner said to me, you have no idea what this person's going through. You know, he has his kids full time, 50% of the time. So give him a break. And I was like, I said, you do realize I was 100% full-time mom, right? And he just shook his head and walked away. Mm-hmm. But I probably shouldn't have said anything, but I did.
I think you should have. I think when we don't.
I was like, wait. I was like, yeah. I don't know what his life is hard right now. Anyhow.
Welcome to life.
Yeah, but I do also think that life has changed in such a way. There was a time, especially since we're talking about accounting, there was a time when, men didn't necessarily go to their kids' games and participate in their kids' lives in any kind of professional services. And that's not the world we live in anymore. They want to have life, and they want to see their kids' games. And so when we're talking about young professionals, and we need to, yes, there are definitely, gender and racial issues that we cannot ignore, but we need to talk about how to help our whole society. And, this applies to young men and, like you're saying, families, and how this is a universal issue that we're dealing with to make our society better. And there are definitely certain areas that are more impacted and will continue to be, and that we have to make greater strides. But we just have
Well, that's
to
the difference between equality and equity. What we're talking about is equity,
Right.
so that people get what they need. What too often the default conversation is equality, so that everyone's getting the same thing. Everyone doesn't need the same thing.
Right.
People need different things. And so it's more uncomfortable to have that conversation about what parents might need that's different from what people who aren't parents might need, what folks who are in different areas. You know, Lori might be thinking about people in urban areas versus rural areas versus whatever, right? So it's an important conversation, and we have to have it, because if we just try to spread it all like peanut butter, no one's going to get what they need, and we're going to not be having the real conversation we should be having. Someone said it better than me. We might all be in the same storm. We are not all in the same boat.
Right.
Yeah, that's great.
So, I mean, the one thing that I would encourage people to do is, you know, you have a panel of amazing women here who've all said you can reach out to them. I would encourage people to reach out, to ask questions, to ask for resources. I think that there's people here that are willing to help, and, you know, and reach out and keep going on. And this conversation would have been an interesting conversation when we were planning on having it back in April or May or whenever this conversation was originally scheduled, and, you know, 7-8 months into a, you know, worldwide pandemic. It's even more interesting, and the world looks different and will continue to.